told you before that in our orchestra we have more than 10 nationalities, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud. You know, music.
For more than 30 years, Rieu has been known as the smiling maestro of magic, the man who revived classical music, sold out arenas worldwide, and brought millions to tears with a single sweep of his bow. To the world, he was joy. He was elegance. He was the king of the waltz. But behind the scenes, Andre was living a second life, one that almost no one suspected. A life he protected with silence, discipline, and a carefully built public image. Fans saw the charisma, but not the cost. They heard the music, but not the battles behind it. For decades, rumors swirled. Why did Andre sometimes disappear during tours? Why did he quietly cancel shows without explanation? Why were his closest orchestra members unusually tight-lipped about his private world? Something didn't add up. Yet no one imagined the truth was this deep or this painful, because Rieu wasn't hiding a scandal. He wasn't protecting a crime. He was protecting himself and the people he loved most. When the truth finally came out, it shocked even those who thought they knew him best. His double life wasn't about secret families, secret relationships, or hidden wealth. It was about a struggle that shaped everything: his career, his personality, his music, and his future. After 30 years, Rieu finally broke his silence. And the story he told changed the way fans look at him forever. This is the truth he never wanted to reveal until now. For millions of fans around the world, Rieu seemed like the last person who could possibly be hiding anything. His charm felt effortless. His smile looked permanent. His waltzes flowed with such warmth and romance that audiences believed they were getting a glimpse straight into his heart. Every performance looked like joy personified, an evening of glittering violins, swirling gowns, and Andre guiding it all with that unmistakable sparkle in his eye. But that sparkling world was only one half of Andre's life. As his career exploded in the 1990s, Andre became a global sensation almost overnight. His recordings climbed charts across Europe. His concerts outsold major pop stars. His orchestra expanded, his travel schedule doubled, and the media elevated him from talented musician to cultural icon. For the public, Rieu had it all: a loving family, a legendary career, and a unique ability to make millions feel like his personal guests. Yet the faster his career climbed, the more carefully Andre constructed a second, hidden life, one he kept firmly out of the spotlight. This wasn't a double life of scandal or secret families. It was something much more human, much more personal, and far more difficult to control. Rieu was quietly suffering from something that would shape nearly every major decision he made: crippling, career-threatening anxiety and chronic stage fright. It sounds impossible. How could a man who has performed in front of more than 20 million people be terrified of the very thing that made him famous? How could someone who appears calm, collected, and charismatic be fighting panic before nearly every concert? But Andre hid it brilliantly. He became an expert in appearing unshakable. Audiences never saw the hours before a show when he paced backstage, sometimes unable to breathe, sometimes unable to speak. They never saw how stress strained his health, his relationships, and even threatened his orchestra's future. Andre knew that if the truth leaked, the image he spent decades building could crack. Sponsors might panic. Fans might worry. Critics might twist it into weakness. That fear only made the anxiety worse, and so the cycle deepened. His orchestra members sensed something was wrong, but Andre trusted only a tiny circle. He expected silence, and they gave it to him. For years they covered for him when he suddenly disappeared before rehearsals. They explained delays, rearranged schedules, and shielded him from questions. To the audience, it looked like perfection. Behind the curtain, Andre was holding himself together with sheer willpower, and as his fame climbed, the pressure to maintain both versions of himself grew unbearable. He knew he couldn't hide forever. But he also believed the world wasn't ready for the truth. That was the first life the world saw, and the second life he desperately tried to keep secret for 3 decades. While the world saw Andre Rieu gliding across stages with effortless grace, the reality behind closed doors was far more fragile. The pressure of maintaining his growing empire tours, rehearsals, recordings, interviews, sponsorships, and endless travel began to build into something he could no longer hide from himself. Started quietly in his early 40s, a trembling hand, a racing heartbeat before stepping onto stage, a strange sense that the room was closing in. At first, Andre dismissed it. Every performer gets nerves, he thought. Every artist feels pressure. But these weren't nerves, they were panic attacks, sudden, violent, debilitating, and they terrified him. For a man whose entire life depended on performing, losing control of his body felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. But instead of slowing down, Andre pushed harder. He increased concert dates, expanded his orchestra, and forced himself into an exhausting cycle. He believed that if he just kept moving, he wouldn't have to face what was happening inside him. But the harder he pushed, the worse the attacks became. Some nights, he would be moments away from stepping on stage when his vision blurred and his knees shook. He felt sure he would collapse in front of thousands. But every time, he forced the smile back onto his face, lifted his bow, and pretended everything was fine. The audience never knew the storm raging inside the man they adored. His musicians noticed the cracks first. They saw him disappear without explanation minutes before rehearsals. They saw the tension, the exhaustion, the quiet moments when Andre would sit alone with his head in his hands, trying to steady himself. Yet not a word leaked to the public. His orchestra was loyal. They loved him. They protected him. But even loyalty couldn't save him from what was coming. By the early 2000s, Andre's schedule had become brutal. 8 shows a week, multiple countries in a month, constant flights, jet lag, interviews, TV appearances. And through it all, he carried the secret he believed he could never share. Then came the night that nearly ended his career. It happened during a European tour, one of his most ambitious. Just an hour before the show, Andre felt a crushing weight in his chest. His vision dimmed. His hands shook violently. He couldn't breathe. He collapsed backstage. His team rushed to him. Doctors were called. The world tour paused for the first time in his career. At first, rumors spread wildly: heart attack, exhaustion, illness. Andre said nothing. He told the public only that he needed rest. In truth, doctors warned him that years of untreated anxiety had severely damaged his health. His body was shutting down. He was told to stop performing or risk permanent consequences. For Andre, the message felt like a death sentence. Music wasn't just a career, it was his identity, his passion, his soul. He had spent decades building a dream that millions loved, and now his own body was threatening to take it away from him. For months, Andre withdrew completely from public life. No interviews, no rehearsals, no performances. Even his closest colleagues said later that they had never seen him so broken, so unsure of his future. It was during this dark chapter that Andre realized the truth. He had spent years living a double life, not because he wanted to deceive the world, but because he felt he had no choice. But there was one more secret, one more revelation that would change everything for him, and for the people who thought they knew him. While the world waited for Andre Rieu to return to the stage, his silence fueled speculation. But behind closed doors, the real crisis was unfolding, not in the concert halls, but inside his home. his marriage, and his sense of purpose. For decades, Andre had lived in two worlds, the public world of glamour, applause, and perfection, and the private world of fear, exhaustion, and emotional collapse. His wife, Marjorie, had always been his anchor. From the early days when they struggled financially to the era of sold-out stadiums, she supported him with quiet strength. She handled his business affairs, protected his image, and shielded him from the darkest corners of fame. But during his months of forced rest, Marjorie saw something she had never seen before her husband completely lost. Andre wasn't practicing. He wasn't talking. He wasn't composing. He wasn't even smiling. The panic attacks had drained him physically and emotionally. But something deeper, something much heavier was crushing him from the inside. For the first time in his life, Andre Rieu admitted to his wife that he didn't know if he wanted to continue. Not just performing, not just touring. He wasn't sure if he wanted to live this life at all anymore. The confession shattered Marjorie. She had watched him give everything to the world, his time, his talent, his health, yet she had never fully realized how much he had sacrificed emotionally. Touring schedules that went on for months. Endless pressure from sponsors. Staff counting on him. Fans expecting perfection. Production costs in the millions. His empire had grown so large that Andre felt like a prisoner inside of it. But the secret that cut the deepest was this. For nearly 30 years, Andre had been hiding the fear that he might lose everything, not because of the music industry, but because of himself. He worried his panic attacks would erupt on stage and embarrass him. He feared audiences would lose confidence in him. He feared investors would pull out if they learned the truth. He feared the orchestra he loved would fall apart without a leader. And worst of all, he feared Marjorie would think he was weak. Instead, she surprised him. One night, after he broke down in tears a moment Andre later said he could never forget, Marjorie grabbed his trembling hands and told him something that changed his life. "You don't owe the world perfection. You owe yourself your life." Her words pierced through the shame he'd been carrying for decades. For the first time, Andre realized he didn't have to be the indestructible maestro the world expected. He could be human. He could struggle. And he could still come back stronger. But the road forward wasn't easy. Doctors instructed him to cut his schedule in half. Sponsors were furious. Some even threatened to withdraw contracts unless he returned quickly. Crew members, relying on income, begged him to resume touring. Andre Acute felt pulled in every direction, except the one he desperately needed toward healing. The turning point came during a quiet morning in Maastricht. Alone in his studio, surrounded by silence, he picked up his violin for the first time in months. His hands trembled. His breath shook. But he played anyway. The sound wasn't perfect. The notes cracked. But he felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. That moment began Andre's slow climb back from the edge. But the world still didn't know what had happened to him, his breakdown, his fear, his near collapse of everything he'd built, and what he was about to reveal publicly would shock millions. And finally expose the double life he had been forced to live. After 30 years of hiding, Andre Rieu finally chose to reveal the truth, not to damage his reputation, not to seek sympathy, but to finally live honestly. And what he admitted shocked even his most devoted fans. The double life wasn't about deceit, affairs, or financial secrets. It was about survival. For decades, Andre had carried a hidden burden, severe anxiety, panic attacks, and the emotional strain of being a global superstar. He had built a life that appeared perfect from the outside, a world of sold-out concerts, glittering gowns and adoring fans, but inside, he was constantly battling a version of himself that feared failure, humiliation, and losing everything he loved. For Andre, The revelation began with a single choice: to stop pretending, to stop letting fear dictate his life, to speak openly about the struggles that had haunted him since the peak of his fame. He admitted that at the height of his career, there were moments he didn't want to perform. There were nights he considered canceling entire tours. There were times he feared stepping onto the stage would destroy him physically and emotionally. Yet, time and again, he forced himself forward for the orchestra, for the fans, for his wife Marjorie, and for the music he loved. But finally, he realized the most important audience was himself. He needed to reclaim his life from the expectations, the pressure, and the secrecy that had defined him for 3 decades. When he spoke publicly about this double life, Andre described the weight of the years he carried silently. He detailed the panic attacks, the emotional exhaustion, and the isolation that accompanied his fame. He shared the private struggles that had almost ended his career and his marriage. And he admitted the profound gratitude he felt for the people who had stood by him, his wife, his orchestra, and his closest friends. The revelation was a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone who admired him. Fans who once thought of him as untouchable now saw him as human, vulnerable, courageous, and deeply relatable. His music, already full of emotion, now carried an added layer of depth, born from personal struggle and triumph. Andre's story is a reminder that even those who seem to have it all can battle unseen demons. It is a lesson in resilience, authenticity, and the quiet power of perseverance. For 30 years, he lived a life that no one could see, yet he never stopped giving the world joy through his music. And now, freed from the secrecy that weighed on him, Andre Rieu is finally whole. The double life is over. The man behind the music has finally spoken, and the world can hear him not just in melody, but in truth.